Last season, I had the opportunity to review a couple of pens from the Ohio-based manufacturer Bexley. Both the models I reviewed, the Equipoise and the Ebonite, were wonderfully made pens with really spectacular gold No. 6 nibs made by Bock. In this video, we'll be taking a look at another line of fountain pens that Bexley made for the late pen collector Jim Gaston in 2001. This exclusive limited edition is a very unusual pen. One of the only Bexley-made pens that doesn't contain any Bexley branding. These pens were manufactured from Schaefer, Crimson Glow, or Cobalt Glow plastics, or a wood grain ebonite, and were fitted with units from a Waterman pen popular in the 90s, the Waterman Le Mans 100. These Schaefer plastics and Waterman nibs were then assembled together into a pen that was clearly inspired by vintage Parker duofolds. The result is a pen that looks both familiar and completely unique. But the real question is, how does it write? Hello everyone, welcome to another pen review here on The Pen Habit. Glad to have you back as I always am. Please allow me to kick off this review by saying a quick thank you to Van Ness Pens at Van Ness 1938 for providing the pens for today's review and giveaway. I really do appreciate it, and they've been a great support to The Pen Habit, Van Ness 1938, and I'll talk a little bit more about them at the end of this video and you'll see why when I get there. So before I do, however, let's dive into these pens. This is the Bexley Gaston exclusive. Now I have two of the three available colors here. This is the Crimson Glow, not Crimson Grow, Crimson Glow acrylic. This is the Cobalt Glow acrylic. These are both, as I understand, Schaefer acrylics. The design of the pen is very vintage Parker duofold inspired. You can see it's got this flat-topped, finial here with a little stair step in it. A very traditional clip with a ball, little ball on the end. I'll come back to this in a second. You've got a cap ring here toward the bottom of the cap, and then the pen tapers a little bit toward another black finial. Now, there's one other version of this pen which is made out of a wood grain ebonite. Very attractive pen, but instead of black finials, it has kind of cream-colored finials, so you'll just want to be aware of that if you're looking at this pen online, that the rosewood version comes with the cream-colored finials. As I've said a couple times, it is very clearly inspired by a Parker duofold of years gone by. It's an attractive design, but pretty plain and straightforward. In my mind, the real star of this is the acrylic. Now, I love a deep blue, and this deep blue has just got a lot of wonderful motion, a lot of color and luminescence in it. It's one of my favorite blue acrylics that I've ever seen. The Crimson Glow is also really quite beautiful, but the blue one just really speaks to me. The only real design flaw in this pen, in my mind, is this clip. Now, the clip is completely appropriate for the pen from a design perspective. The real problem is the implementation. So as is true of most metal hardware on pens, this is made of brass, but it appears that that Bexley did not plate or gold fill this clip. So as a result, it gathers a patina over time. And that by itself isn't a problem, except that the cap band does not gather a patina. It stays bright and shiny gold, whereas this is starting to turn kind of that darker, murky, greenish color. Now, if they had picked one or the other for all the hardware, that would have been fine. But because they mixed and matched, it looks like the clip is damaged or a little dirty all the time. It's very easy to polish it up. You can just grab a polishing cloth or a little semi-chrome and polish it off. Since there's no plating on there, you don't need to worry about taking off the plating. However, I'm probably going to remove the finial, take the clip off, and take the clip to a jeweler to have them gold plate it for me so it matches the rest of the hardware on the pen. I think that would be a more cohesive look. It's unfortunate that they didn't decide to just do that when they manufactured the pen, but it is what it is, and we got to go with it. So it takes 2.5 turns to remove, or 2.25 turns, excuse me, to remove the cap from the barrel. Underneath, you've got some nice smooth threads, a kind of almost perfectly cylindrical black section that has a metal core, and I'll show you that in just a second. Got a little ring here with a furrow. That's not the word I want, but it's got a little, indent along here, a little concave indent. And then you come to this Waterman nib. Now, this was the nib from the Waterman Le Mans 100, which was a Waterman pen that was popular during the 90s. Really smooth, wonderful nib. But again, we'll get to that in a bit. We've got the, it's kind of rhodium plated along the top. Everything else is in the original 18 karat gold. You've got the Waterman logo, and then it says Ideal, Waterman, 18K 750, and Paris. So, a nice nib, not particularly showy, really attractive though, really big tip. And that's the thing about these nibs. I don't know what Jim Gaston ordered when he ordered these pens from Bexley, but most of what's left out on the market, and from what I understand, Jim was a fan of big, fat, juicy, broad nibs. And the nibs on these things absolutely fit that category. These have some of the biggest blobs of iridium on the tip that I have ever seen on a nib that's just a broad. It's a paintbrush. And I'll show you that when we get to the writing. The pen is a cartridge converter filled pen. It uses standard international converters, comes with a converter as well. You can also put long or short cartridges in here if you wanted to. But as I mentioned, there is a metal core to this pen, so you can't necessarily use this for an eyedropper. And overall, I like the vintage duofold look, so I like that the design comes from this. It's a touch narrow for my taste, so if you like a slightly narrower pen, this one would fit. It's not too terribly narrow. It's 11 millimeters, so it's still quite usable. Usable in the hand without posting, but it can be posted. It posts moderately deeply. This is a pen I actually prefer to use posted because it feels just a little bit more balanced when I do post it. So everyone has heard that old story about Henry Ford saying you can get it in any color you want so long as it's black. That's kind of how it is with these Gaston exclusives, at least what's left of this inventory. You can get it in any nib size you want so long as it's broad, and what a broad. So this is a big, fat, wet broad. It's got a little bit of stubbish quality to it. You can see here just a little tiny bit of that, you know, a little bit narrower from side to side than it is from up to down, but not significantly. It is smooth though. Holy cow, is it smooth. It is also really quite a wet ink. Or excuse me, not a wet ink, a wet nib. I mean, it just lays down the ink. This pen goes through ink like crazy. In fact, I'm just about out. There's not a lot left in this converter, I'm just realizing. But with a nib this big and as wet as it is, this pen puts down a lot of ink. This is not a pen you're gonna wanna use on cheap copy paper. Really, really, really smooth though. I'd say on the feedback scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is really smooth, no feedback at all, and 10 is like writing with a nail on a roofing tile. This is like a 1.5 or a 2. It's one of the smoother nibs I've used. It doesn't have much in the way of line variation from pushing. You can get a little bit out of it, but not much, and I wouldn't try too much. It's a terrible reverse writer though. Scratchy and just awful. One of the worst reverse writers I've ever used. So if you want that, you're probably going to need to send this to a Nibmeister. Now, speaking of sending these to Nibmeisters, some people love these big, fat, wet, juicy nibs. I'm one of them. But when I'm writing from day to day, this nib that writes almost like a double broad is a little too much for my regular handwriting. I mean, you can see I had to write much larger here than I normally do just to keep the loops of my letters from closing in on themselves. So when I was in San Francisco, I took this one, with the cobalt blue one, to Mike Masayama, the Nibmeister, and had him grind it down to a kind of a wide medium. And that's what this is here. So these nibs, because the tipping blob is just so blobby, you can have a lot of cool things done to these nibs if you want to send them to a Nibmeister. So these would make spectacular cursive italics or stubs. It'd be a big fat architect grind if you wanted to do one of those. So these are pens that are really quite nice to play around with if you want to send them to a Nibmeister. As far as overall performance, not an ounce of skipping, not an ounce of hard starting, no ink starvation. Well, the only ink starvation I had was in this pen, but it's the ink I'm using. So I'm using a Scribes document ink, the Scribes Document Brown. I picked it up in San Francisco. I wanted to try it out. It runs a little on the dry side, and I saw just hints of ink starvation, but nothing that was that would stop the pen from writing at all. It would lose a little bit of its juiciness. But with a lubricated ink, or almost any standard ink that I've tried in these pens, the ink just flows without any problem at all. So overall, I really, really love the way these pens write. They're not quite as comfortable in my hand as some of my other pens, but I was able to sit down and write a 5-page review by hand of this pen using the broad nib, and didn't have any problems, no cramping, no hard starting, no ink starvation. The only thing it did is almost empty a converter of ink. So if you like your big, fat, juicy nibs, these are probably really good pens for you to play around with. Now, the Gaston exclusive came out in 2001, and because it's an exclusive limited edition, only a small number were made. You can find them here or there out in the wild, but the reason early on I said I was going to talk about Van Ness Pens is Van Ness Pens was kind of the local shop for Jim Gaston, and when he passed away, a lot of his collection ended up at their shop. So they have probably about, I'd say, 40, 50 of each color of these left in stock, at least at the time of recording this, which is middle of September of 2016. Most of what they have are big fat broad nibs, but I did see these around when I went to San Francisco and the DC show. I found them from other people as well, so they're still out there. They're ridiculously cheap though. Right now they're going for about 150 bucks. They retail for, they've got a retail price of 200. They're going for 150. You could spend almost that much on just a gold nib alone. So, at that price, you're buying a superb nib and a pen holder or a nib holder. The fact that it's made out of really beautiful materials, it's well made, and that it's got that kind of vintagey feel is just a plus in my book. If you wanted to buy one of these, you want to buy a big, fat, juicy, wet nib, and goodness gracious, that's what these are. So you can get them at Van Ness Pens. You can also find them in other places in small quantities here or there, but I do know that Van Ness Pens has a big batch of them from when Jim passed away a couple years ago. So I think that should do it for this review of the Bexley Gaston exclusive. Again, thank you to Van Ness Pens for sending these to me for review purposes. I will be giving away the Crimson Glow version of this pen with the big, fat, wet, juicy nib, so keep an eye out on penhabit.com, on facebook.com/penhabit, or on twitter.com/penhabit for announcements of when this giveaway will happen. Every time I post that, I get several people saying, "Where's the giveaway?" So watch those 3 spots, and the giveaway will be announced in all 3 of those spots whenever it happens. I generally try to do giveaways a week or 2 after the review airs, but I've got a lot of giveaways going on this season, and I don't like running multiple giveaways simultaneously. So just keep an eye out, and hopefully we'll get you taken care of. So that should do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you here next time on The Pen Habit. Bye.